Thank you for tuning in. Divine Nobodies podcast. Jen, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I found the answer to both of our prayers, by the way.
Oh, yeah? Tell me more.
Yeah. I have been seeking all my life for something as convenient as this. Actually, I was taking a really large, deep dive into YouTube videos and talks, which is what I normally do on the weekday. And I found this this website called the Enigmatic Wisdom. Oh, I totally butchered that. The Enigmatic Wisdom of Deepak Chopra.
Oh,
I can't believe I had to try hard to get that one out.
That's a hard one. It's a tongue twister.
Can you say enigmatic 5 times fast?
Enigmatic.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Enigmatic. I feel like you need a little practice, but I got it. The Enigmatic Wisdom of Deepak Chopra. The reason why this came about is because I was watching a series of debates between him and Sam Harris and a few other people like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. And Deepak Chopra was one of the speakers on this panel. Mm-hmm. And me and you are advocates of Deepak Chopra. We love his work. I have a lot of his book, the Third Jesus. It's a really, really good book. I have a lot of his books in my bookshelf. And I love him and Marianne Williamson and that sort of vein of spirituality, metaphysics. And he was on this panel of skeptics, atheists, and scientists. And of course, he doesn't really win any points with them. But it was interesting to see them kind of debate. Mm-hmm. And one of them was talking about how Deepak Chopra doesn't, a lot of the stuff that he says is anecdotal, which I disagree with, because when they're taking a scientific approach, the realm of spirituality isn't really apparent in a lot of the things that they talk about. But they were saying that he says a lot of really fancy words and a lot of words that seem to go really well together.
You know, I disagree with that, but even if he did, let's just hypothetically say he did, there is a real skill in stringing words together to sound as eloquent as he does.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And
I'm a fan either way.
And I'm a fan of Deepak Chopra too, because I've read his books and they make sense to me. Well, I like to think that me and you are pretty intelligent people. And I think the reason why is because there's a spiritual underpinning behind his work. There's a loving intention behind what he does. He's very smart. I mean, he's a medical doctor.
Yeah.
You know, he studied science and also biology. But, you know, I think that's the whole point when it comes to theoretical physicists and stuff like that. They're always trying to discredit everything. You know,
that's medicine, though. Everybody's always trying to discredit each other.
Yeah.
That's why they call it a practice.
We can talk a little bit about that because there's a way to go about debating and explaining your thoughts. But the reason why I bring this up is because one of the guys on this video was talking about a website you can go to called Wisdom of Chopra. And it's an algorithm that somebody put together where they took every single word that Deepak Chopra's ever said with the hashtag cosmic consciousness on his Twitter and put it into the search engine. And I imagine it was just sort of supposed to be ironic for them, but I think it's actually pretty interesting because it does sort of have this tinge of like universal sort of wisdom, no matter how you swing the words. And all you do is just press this button. It says receive more wisdom. And I'm going to read off a few of these, and then we're going to try and see if it makes sense to us and see if we can pull at least some wisdom from it.
All right.
And
I like it.
Yeah, this would be like a celebration of words. So I'm only going to read this, and I'm not reading this to discredit it, but this is really interesting. This person says on the website, it has been said by some that the thoughts and tweets of Deepak Chopra are indistinguishable from a set of profound sounding words put together in a random order, particularly the tweets tagged cosmic consciousness. The site aims to test that claim. Each quote is generated from a list of words that can be found in Deepak Chopra's Twitter stream, randomly stuck together in a sentence. You know, so I'm gonna press the word and I'm gonna read it to you, Jen. Okay. And we're gonna try and figure out if this is something that is coherent, and we'll also just test the algorithm out, see how good it is. All right, it says your random fictional Deepak Chopra quote says, "A formless void opens total abstract beauty."
Okay.
And what I get from this formless void, which is emptiness, which is something that he talks a lot about, right?
Yeah.
Formless void, which is the formlessness essentially being, because he's more or less like a Hindu, would be Atman and Brahman in Hinduism, which is the definition of God, opens total abstract beauty. And God is, in a lot of ways, objectively abstract.
Yeah.
Right? So this makes sense. So 1 point to Deepak Chopra for throwing in some truth, even though an algorithm is just randomly putting these together.
Yeah.
So this isn't incoherent. This is something Deepak Chopra would say.
Yeah.
All right, second one. Let's see here. Pick another one. Your consciousness regulates pure possibilities.
Oh, that totally makes sense.
It totally does, right?
Your consciousness does regulate possibilities.
In pure possibilities at that. Like it's not even just possibilities. Pure possibilities, I think at the basis of that is something a bit deeper. Mm-hmm. Your consciousness regulates pure possibilities. Those pure possibilities sort of trump the regular sort of material, everyday 3D, three-dimensional reality sort of endeavors. This is pure possibilities.
Pure ones.
Everything that arises out of love.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next one. The physical world influences the doorway to happiness.
It does. I mean, if you can ignore that.
Yeah, the physical world influences the doorway to happiness. I think for this, I would look at the physical world is almost the perfect mirror that will point you in the direction of happiness. The physical world influences door to happiness because without the physical world, at least in this dimension, we couldn't awaken to happiness.
Right.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a set of circumstances that just invoke happiness. I mean, the only reason why we understand happiness is because we've gone through the sort of gambit of bullshit and good experiences at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it adds value.
I mean, yeah, what you experience in this lifetime in this physical realm does influence if you're happy or sad or whatever. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So he's one.
I think they all make sense.
We're at like number 3. All right, I'm going to do one more.
Okay.
It says, non-judgment grows through sub-empirical genes.
Okay, that one didn't make sense.
That one's kind of tough.
That one's
kind
a
of
little tough.
Edges.
Yeah.
Non-judgment grows through sub-empirical genes. Okay, so the algorithm wins in that regard, I guess. So good health.
1 of 4, not bad.
Yeah, 1 of 4. I'll do one more just to even things out. We want to end on a good note.
Okay.
So another one, good health is the ground of irrational life.
Okay, also doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I'd like to think that like the spirit of Deepak Chopra is like running through this search engine, secretively distributing this wisdom, but you have to be maybe at a certain level of consciousness in order to just decipher the good shit from the bad. Yeah, so this is interesting, right?
It is interesting.
Yeah, super interesting.
It.
Yeah. So the reason why this came up, we're not discrediting Deepak Chopra. I've been following his work for a really, really long time. And the thing is with Deepak is he's one of, I guess, very few figures in the spiritual community, especially predominantly back in, I want to say like the early 2000s, that was setting his best foot forward and trying to bridge a really large gap between spirituality and science.
Yeah.
You know, and he is a medical doctor. And I think that's where a lot of his credibility comes because he's not stupid. He's a smart guy.
Yeah, he's a really smart guy.
He's well-versed in spirituality. But the one thing that you can find with him is that he has enough courage to go out in public and to debate a lot of people that that don't share the same sort of belief structures as him.
Yeah.
And that's going to kind of segue into what it is that me and Jen wanted to talk about today, which is why it's so important not to impose your beliefs on other people. You know, why it's so important to not impose your beliefs on other people. This is a really important subject because we've all experienced this before firsthand.
Oh, yeah. And it shows up in so many different aspects of life. It shows up when you're talking about religion or politics, social issues, raising children, family traditions, opinions about your friends or even your family members' spouses or partners. I mean, it rears its ugly head in all these different places.
Yeah. And when we were talking about it in the beginning about these debates with these fellows that created this website, I mean, I think I'm never going to discredit anybody that disagrees with Deepak Chopra. Mm-hmm. I think the whole point with conversation or the conversation of spirituality is to remain open and to just always be receptive to different viewpoints because we live in a largely secular world and the idea of a non-denominational culture brings fear of uncertainty for a lot of people, because people, they can't handle uncertainty.
Right.
So they have to place their trust in something.
Exactly.
And this is ultimately why religion exists in a lot of ways, because it represents, at least to me in some ways, an insecurity that most people have,
Yeah, absolutely.
To place like their faith into something else to save us. In a lot of ways, it keeps us from having to take accountability for our own actions and salvations, which we can go into. But if we're alive, at least from my experience, this is part of the human journey where we have a difficult time with not knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
So what do we do in order to draw in some comfort from that idea, which is we create beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
We create belief systems. We create ideas and concepts. And this is the reason why, we have the sort of like worldly curriculum that we have in school, in spirituality and religion and just government in general. It's a large system of values and beliefs and ideas, and we ascribe to those, all depending on which door we want to go down or which route that we want to take in life.
Absolutely. I feel like the oldest example of this is religion by far, because it's you're forcing this set of ideology on other people to prove obedience or commitment to the religion, and that comes from a place of insecurity, because you need a reinforcement for why you're believing what you believe, and you need other people to come on board to provide that reinforcement.
That's true. Because at the very core, we're not entirely sure. There are people out there, obviously scientists. There are a lot of intelligent people that are out there. Whenever you take a stance to say like this is indefinitely and definitively how reality works, in a lot of ways, at least from my spiritual sort of perspective, you cut yourself off from the potentiality of anything else coming into your field.
Anything different, yeah.
Anything different. And that can lead to a lot of issues because everybody's different. The world is always changing and evolving. And the human spirit is a perfect example of how that happens. And the one thing that I've never understood, Jen, about spirituality, especially that sort of fundamental Christianity that we follow, is that it's a religion that's thousands and thousands of years old. And for the most part, they don't allow it to change and evolve. Mm-hmm. Yet everything around us in our collective field at the moment is accelerating so fast and changing so fast. Consciousness is evolving in a pace that I think is unprecedented for the time that we're in, which that's not a bad thing. There's this acceleration that a lot of us draw excitement over because we have smartphones, we have computers, we have access to knowledge and wisdom and all this information that we didn't have before. Mm-hmm. And that's really important because it's allowing us and our spirits to evolve at a much faster pace. So you have people awakening to God and awakening to these sort of like spiritual truths a lot faster. But at the same time, you look back at the church and they want to stay exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's like, what incentive do they have? It doesn't make sense to me that most people are skeptical of everything. That includes somebody sharing information word of mouth, somebody reading something, writing a book and sharing information. There are people that don't believe in near-death experiences. There are people that won't believe in anything they haven't experienced themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah, but somehow the workings of these prophets that wrote the Bible, the First and the Second Testament, we somehow just blindly believe that. Right. And then we say faith has to come into the field. And I'm all for faith, but if you're going to be open.
But I'm also about changing for the times too. And this is an example that sticks out in my mind because I have a personal connection to this is suicide in the Catholic Church. So, if you commit suicide, the old school thought is you're going to hell. Sorry for you. That's it. But I think that as science has evolved, we've discovered that, this is a mental illness and it's not, the person isn't taking their own life for for any other reason other than they're mentally ill. And I think that there's enough evidence to support that now that, but the church hasn't changed their belief on that, you know, and if they have, they're definitely never going to say it out loud because they don't want their constituents to think that it's okay to commit suicide. Like, finally, you got a free pass.
Yeah.
Like everybody's just going to run out and do that. But
and that's obviously spirituality as far as the Christian and Catholic side is a lot of it is driven in fear. I mean, these are old, antiquated sort of Roman Catholic ways of looking at things. And we have to think back of Emperor Constantine during that time, who was the ruler of Rome, of the Roman Empire during that time. And that existed hundreds of years, if not thousands, after Jesus had actually died. And they found this Bible, and there were a lot of books of the Bible that were actually taken out, including the Book of Enoch, including the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. These were really, really important books of the Bible, which later were coined off as the Gnostic Gospels. And they share a lot of very different stories about Jesus and about Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Judas, his relationship with Judas. So obviously a very different narrative. But you're absolutely right. Like the times that we're in don't seem to fit with that sort of fundamental Christian sort of theology. But at the same time, they have an incentive to keep it exactly the same because money's involved. Yeah. You know, because you have a lot of these people in these positions of power that still seek authority over other people, that are still collecting donations, that are still receiving the tax exemption status for having these churches. And I'm not to say that the Christian church shouldn't exist, but the issue that everybody probably listening to this podcast has experienced at some point is by being judged by others in the church for being a seemingly human being.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or being different and not being a usual churchgoer or being new or just looking different and not looking like the typical congregation or the typical church person. I mean, there's just. And I think that there's been some more progressive churches out there that have popped up where you don't have to dress up in your Sunday's best like you did in the South. I mean, I remember my grandmother being so embarrassed because I went to church and I didn't have hose on. Like pantyhose, you know, under my dress. Because in the South, like that was considered slutty.
It's interesting,
I was a little
right?
kid.
Like you have those like Pentecostal religions where it's like the women have to wear these long skirts and they're all they're jean skirts and like their hair has to look a certain way. It's like, well, I don't understand that.
Yeah,
you know,
I don't get it.
Like it's I don't know. It's a really, really interesting thing. But as I go along my journey in spirituality, I started looking less at the sort of like literal approaches to these scriptures and trying to find that sort of baseline level of truth, which is something very simple and something very subtle, which is just love. If that's the basis at the ground and the substratum of everything in spirituality, then we can find that in everywhere, in many places outside of just conventional religion.
Hey,
you're
that's
absolutely
a common
right.
ground that
like,
anybody can find.
Exactly. And what'll end up happening after that point, you tell that to a Christian, okay, they put you into categories. Oh, you're a universalist. You're an atheist because you don't believe in this. There are other forms of Christian churches that are out right now. They call them the emergent Christians, the Rob Bells of the world. And Rob Bell, it's interesting. I don't know if you've read or heard of Rob Bell, but he had these like series of, he had a church. He was a pastor of a church called Mars Hill. I think it was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Okay. And he was, in a lot of ways, what I would actually consider the Jesus of our time, just in the way that he disperses his information, because he kind of works under the guise of a pastor, but he has a very, very sort of esoteric, sort of like Gnostic approach to it. But he makes it in such a relatable way as to almost make him seem like a universalist. So people give him a lot of shit because he talks about like the mind and the ego and the observer and the observed and stuff like that, stuff you don't normally hear in those churches. And he has a lot of
kind of basic science and basic psychology.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing that he does is he bridges science with spirituality. I think that's becoming a lot more widespread now and accepted.
Yeah.
I I think it's safe to say at this point that that old sort of antiquated Christian belief is being challenged more so in our world now. I think solely based off of the fact that people are all collectively accepting the fact that the church tends to get its momentum from fear.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of things these days are getting their momentum from fear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's 2020.
Yeah.
It's all fear-based.
Yeah, it's all fear-based. And to bring it into what we're talking about, on imposing your beliefs on people, I guess we would start with the reason why we do it.
Yeah.
Why is that we feel a need to impose our beliefs on other people? Because this is what happens. And I think me and you collectively come from experience, because everybody's been this person before. Mm-hmm. Every single person has believed in something and wanted to share it with somebody else with the hope that we can either convert them, that we can either gain favor by them. I mean, if we're human, it's just something that we've all experienced. And I think through a course of trial and error, we realize the futility of that and realize why, especially in spirituality, why it's not such a productive thing. And the reason why I say that is because when we impose our beliefs on other people, especially when it comes to healing, and we'll put that in a context and we'll say healing for a second, because that's a lot of what we hear in the healing and spiritual community. We take their opportunity to heal and find out themselves away from them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I do.
Because if the journey is an experiential one, which is your life and everything that you gain as far as wisdom comes down to everything that you've reached out and touched with your own hands, everything that you've tasted and heard. And basically your experiential wisdom comes from one thing, which is your action in this life.
Right.
And the only way that you can make sense of your own spirituality and your own place in the realm of that is by drawing from your own experience. Mm-hmm. Everything that we all know of love, everything that we all know of anger and fear, the fundamental emotions that we have in life, the only thing that we understand of that are our own experiences of it. Mm-hmm. So when somebody comes along and says, hey, this is the way that life is, a lot of people will hear it. And that's not to say that you won't take something from it. And there's a difference between sharing information with somebody and being open to the possibilities that you may be actually wrong and you may actually be right. That isn't the thing that's wrong. What's wrong is when we force our opinions and beliefs on somebody else and don't respect the fact that they have their own.
That they have their own, yeah. And actually listening to what someone has to say. And this is something that's pretty new. And I definitely saw it very aggravated in 2020 with so much division in our society. But prior to that, you could have a conversation with someone and disagree with them, but still have a conversation and not get upset. But something changed, and I'm not sure exactly what it was, but now people only want to hear their opinion coming out of your mouth. And if you are not voicing their opinion, then you're stupid, or you're an idiot, or you don't understand, or, whatever. So it's just really interesting how we can no longer have conversations anymore.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And even when I was watching these talks, the talks that I was watching earlier today were between Deepak Chopra, who's he's a spiritual teacher and author, and then Sam Harris, who's a world-renowned atheist, and then Michael Shermer, who's sort of like a skeptic. And they had this talk at the series of talks. One of them was at Caltech on the nature of God. And these guys were just shitting all over Deepak Chopra, like all over the place. And of course, that wouldn't be the most ideal place for somebody like Deepak Chopra to sort of dish out his level of spirituality at Caltech, because that's all scientists, and I worked at JPL for a long time. And a lot of those people are pretty rational. They're pretty understanding, and they're pretty open. But for whatever reason, Sam Harris and Michael Schumer were just crapping all over him on stage. And for those of you who, I guess there was a difference between almost like Newtonian versus Darwinian views, very masculine, very feminine type of discussions. Newtonian is I think, driven more by science. Like they think that the the reason why, for example, like love is nothing but like a chemical reaction. It's like oxytocin. DNA is nothing but a tangled arrangement of molecules, and morality is nothing but a social construct. So they have an answer, a very scientific answer for everything. And what I found in these interviews and in these talks when I was watching them is that like they had such conviction in what they were saying, and they didn't seem open to possibilities, and they seemed very conclusive that God didn't exist. But at the basis, they seemed very confused by everything that Deepak Chopra had to say.
Yeah.
Because he was operating from this level of there's something other than the physical at work.
Right.
He's operating from this level of there's a spiritual underpinning behind all of this that you need to be aware of that is moderating all of this. Like they couldn't, like Sam Harris and these other fellows, they couldn't distinguish. They looked at the brain as being the sort of definitive command center from which everything arises. And so if you're looking at the brain as just neurons, these are just spontaneous firings that are driven by neurochemicals. And then you look at Deepak Chopra, which is there is a force that uses the brain, but it isn't the brain. And it's hard to try and communicate that to somebody that doesn't think spirit exists.
Yeah.
And in context of what we're talking about, I didn't like the fact that they weren't more compassionate towards Deepak Chopra. It's like and the reason why, it made it seem almost like there was way more insecurity from their perspective because they absolutely had to be right.
Right.
You know, like they absolutely had to be right. And you can tell Deepak Chopra just had this sort of smirk on his face. He knew he was in the wrong place. Yeah. But he knew, you can just tell by his face that he knew that nothing he communicated to these guys was going to get through to them.
Was going to get through, yeah.
And that's sort of, and that's sort of like the
narcissistic thing to think of, right?
Yeah.
Because just because you're right doesn't mean the other person is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your ideas may be amazing, but they just may not be the right fit for the person that you're talking to. And just like you were talking about earlier about experiences, we all have different experiences that shape our opinions.
Yeah.
So,
and you have to really look at, because even though these guys, they obviously thought that they were right, there was something about how callous they were to Deepak Chopra, where I just started trying to intuitively just read their behavior. There's something in them that obviously got mad. Yeah. What is that? Yeah. What does that need to be right come from? Like, where does that?
Wonder. I've always wondered that.
Like, where does that come from? Where does this impetus to shit all over somebody else's beliefs in order to be right? And then I come down to that is also an insecurity.
It has to be.
Right? Because it draws the reactivity inside of your body, which is that primitive response, that root chakra based response that we talked about in I think one of our last episodes, which is that flight or fight response that comes in when we feel threatened.
Yeah.
And at no point did Deepak Chopra feel threatened, but at every point did these guys make absolutely sure, like their ultimate goal was to make Deepak Chopra feel and know that he was wrong, you know.
It's just such poor communication too. I mean, everybody wants to, when you're having a conversation, you want to make sure that the other person really does hear what you're saying. And nobody likes to be railroaded. Nobody likes to talk to someone that is just talking over them and trying to discredit or disprove every word that's coming out of their mouth. That's not effective communication. That's one person trying to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, and I can respect a conversation between a scientist and a spiritual guru. And the reason why is because, especially even an atheist, those are the conversations that I love. An atheist with somebody spiritual, because an atheist is just as spiritual normally as somebody that is, because they have a very reductionist type of mentality. They take one thing and they dissect it and they try and get to the smallest, most, fundamental aspect of what that is. It's the same exact thing that in Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta Hinduism, where you're subtracting. You're subtracting all the untruths. You're subtracting all the illusion in order to arrive at some base level of love. And that is exactly what atheists do. Although atheists won't say they believe in something, they won't say that they believe in a biblical God, but there's an impulse in them to want to find out the answers to all of this. This is what I don't understand, is that if you don't believe that there's a God, if you believe that there's no point to all of this, what is the impulse in you to give a shit? You know?
Yeah.
Like what is it in them that drives them to go through this really long journey of discrediting everything? What is the point of that? And what is even the point of
tangled
understanding?
up neurons, right?
Yeah. Like and they're not just openly saying, "Oh, it's just a dance. This is just, we're all just word salading together." Like there's a drive for meaning somewhere.
Ooh, a Chopra salad.
You know, a Chopra sour. So there's a drive for meaning, right?
Yeah.
And what does that drive for meaning come from? And this is why I think the contradiction exists, because an atheist will say they don't believe something, but the fact that they are so passionate about what they believe shows that they're trying to find meaning.
Right.
You know?
That's a good point.
I think...
I never thought about that. I had a friend that was
really,
an atheist in school, and he was so hard-headed. But after one trip to Burning Man, I think that changed his mind. So
exactly right. That's what I was saying the whole time. Just go to Burning Man.
Just go to Burning Man. You'll understand. You'll get it.
or go to Peru. But it's like, but this is the thing though, right? Is that like, we've come across those people that are like, you know, you just do this. But Deepak Chopra, yours and I, our entire journey is worked into understanding that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all of it. And I was thinking about this the other day. When I was watching these YouTube videos, obviously all men, full male panel, you know, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, like Deepak Chopra, all men. And there's like a certain energy to how they debate. Yeah. They have to be right. And they're just, they're bouncing back and forth. And there's this sort of almost smugness to them when they speak.
Yeah.
But then you go and you get, you know, Marianne Williamson on stage, or some of these females in the spiritual community on stage. And it's just like a natural, like a nice collaboration of ideas. Yeah. And not to say that there aren't men that are like that, but I think the reason why I bring this up is because this is a really hard contrast between masculine energy, feminine energy.
And masculine why you need
energy, both. Yeah,
why
masculine energy. Masculine energy is very rational. Mm-hmm. It is based in what you can prove with your eyes and with science. Feminine energy is based in potentiality, the unknown. And that is where a lot of the truth and spirituality comes from. So integrating both is, I think, the key. So it's not bad that they both, that Deepak Chopra and Sam Harris debate each other. But what I think needed to happen in that conversation was that they needed to express more compassion for each other, because they were on two completely different, separate journeys. And his reality was entirely different than the other.
Yeah. And just to respectfully communicate. I mean, compassion is one thing, but also being respectful and listening and letting the person that is speaking to you know that you're actually listening. You know, it really does change the dynamic of a conversation. Yeah. It's very hard to, and you know, just like whenever you're about to have a breakup conversation with, you know, someone you're dating, they know that it's coming, you know that it's coming, and just the energy between the two people, the conversation is already off to a bad start. You know, just having that energy of knowing that this conversation is not going to go well. Yeah. And anytime you enter into a conversation like that, inevitably it doesn't go well. Yeah. Especially when you're discussing really complex things like the dynamics of a relationship or spirituality, it's so important to remain open. Yeah. It's because it's so easy to forget, especially in the heat of a relationship. It's so easy to forget that they are a different person than you are, with their own emotions, their own experience. And we create all these barriers. We create all these sort of walls right at the beginning, when it should be just an exploration of like ideas and emotions, you know? Yeah, and absolutely. And I don't understand why, let's just say hypothetically, you believed in something and you wanted somebody else to know about it. And I'm guessing with the intention to somehow convert them into your realm of thinking. There's something to be celebrated about the fact that everybody thinks differently than you do. Right. Because that is the way that source operates. There's an unpredictability to source that covers the full spectrum of human creativity, which is unbound and untethered to conceptual frameworks.
Like, we should celebrate the fact that there are all these different people in the world that have the opportunity to believe something different than you do.
Right.
And I think the whole goal, especially if you're trying to express your spirituality to somebody, is to just embody it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up being a sort of beacon to truth to other people. In context to our podcast, when it comes to spirituality, I mean, we never want to come across as preachy to anybody that's listening. The only thing that happens between, I think, me and Jen is that we are open to the possibilities that life is a lot more complex than we think.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about spirituality isn't so much that we're trying to arrive to a destination, but more so that we're trying to, it becomes a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a conversation. Exactly. That is, and as long as we're saying it's a conversation, it's always moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's always free to change. And I change my mind a lot.
Oh, me too.
You know?
Yeah.
And
on a lot of different topics.
A lot of different topics because, you know, like we're open to learning. If somebody comes across our path and they're able to sort of wax poetic about something I'm interested in, I mean, my beliefs may change.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's what I'd like to say is that, like, I don't hold my belief. And I think you talked about this, Jen, about like not putting so much into your beliefs,
mm-hmm.
you know, because they can so easily change. That doesn't mean that the entirety of who you are as a person changes.
No.
At the basis of who you are, if you're loving, then you don't have to overly identify with any belief, but you can be open to the potentials that come along with believing different things.
Exactly. Yeah. And
you know,
if you're married to your ideas, it's very hard to understand or hear another person whenever they have an idea that is different than yours.
Exactly. And it's like that. How do you learn anything new if you know everything already?
That's right. Ask 18-year-old me. I fucking knew everything.
Yeah. 18-year-old you?
Yeah.
And
Back when I was 18 and I knew everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those days.
It's crazy because when you're young, there's almost an incentive to do that because you spend a large part of your youth basically under somebody else's rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're driven by rules. You're driven by what people allow you to do and what people don't allow you to do. So it almost seems like a part of the natural journey of the person to go through that, almost like this tinge of narcissism, because after that point, you start to get older, you start to develop a sense of self,
mm-hmm.
and you start holding very strongly your beliefs and convictions because you no longer want to live by the beliefs and convictions of others, which is your parents,
right. Mm-hmm.
which is your school system, you know, and it makes sense why children go through that rebellious stage.
Yeah.
Somebody actually, you know, you were a nurse and you probably know a little bit about this biologically, but, you know, kids go through this certain period where their hormones are starting to move through their veins and
mm-hmm.
they're known for getting kind of cranky.
Yeah.
And they're known for getting really rebellious and they talk back to you and
yeah. I need a lot more sleep and eat a lot more food. Mm-hmm.
Right. But I started thinking about this. I don't think that hormones just randomly just move through your body. I mean, I imagine they do, but I also feel like there's a spirit and a certain package of emotions that is being unloaded into the body that creates the capacity for this to happen. I think the reason why, this is my perspective, Jen. I think the reason why kids go through that rebellious stage is because there's a certain point where they can't take the lies anymore. You find out Santa Claus is not real. Mm-hmm. You find out the Easter Bunny's not real. You find out that, you know, life isn't exactly the way that it is in Disney movies. And you start questioning a lot of things that you're told when you're young are true that aren't true.
Yeah. You're bamboozled so many times. Like my, for example, my mom used to say that I made really good coffee. So I would wake up early so I could start the coffee pot every morning. This is like really dating myself. This is before there were automatic coffee pots, right? And it wasn't that I made good coffee. I didn't make good coffee. I just got up early to do it for her so she didn't have to, right? So then as you get older, you're like, oh, I see what's going on here. I'm getting bamboozled. This is bullshit.
Yeah, you get
You're bullshitting me.
Yeah. And we get so surprised when kids act out.
Right.
You know, we get so surprised that they want to be in the room with the door closed, like listening to metal music, that a lot of the message coming out of that is how to think for yourself and be different, because everybody wants to conform to being the same.
For sure.
So it almost seems like something that we sort of ask for in a lot of ways. And
oh my God, that Rage Against the Machine album. Oh,
exactly.
That was like the anthem to my high school years. Well, was I in high school or was I in junior high? Shit. I don't remember.
You want to know a story about the Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine? You know, he grew up in Irvine.
Oh, he did? Ooh, I had the biggest crush on him.
He grew up in Irvine, right? And he faced a lot of racism there, prejudice. Like people were super,
I believe that.
Mistreated him through school.
They
made fun of his race and his ethnicity, like all through school. And that pissed him off something awful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure did. I heard they're touring again, so I want to go see him.
Yeah?
I saw him years ago at the Voodoo Fest in New Orleans with Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh.
And that was, it was pretty awesome.
Nice.
So, yeah. But
very cool.
They broke up right after that, and I haven't seen him since then, or even heard really much from them. But
yeah, they're a perfect example of like obviously people as rebellious teens get into the Rage Against the Machine phase.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was just like
do what you tell me.
Yeah. So that was like a fun factoid. You know, another thing that makes me think of this whole conversation, which is like, we need to have people that disagree. Like we need to have people believe something different, because that is the most it's the greatest training ground for the spiritual journey, to come across people that create that contrast and that polarity.
That polarity is what provokes thought, right? If everyone agrees with each other, then there's no thinking. You know, there has to be some disagreement to provoke thought. Yeah.
And I think it's just to always be open. And even if, and this is what I think is for this podcast and this subject is, don't impose your beliefs on others. And the reason why is because, and somebody told me this a long time ago, you know, the greatest thing about advice is everybody gives it, but nobody takes it. Mm-hmm. Even if, say, you had the answer to the universe and you had a firsthand conversation with God, and he gave you all of the solutions to every problem, and you went and shared that with anybody, any given person, no matter who it is. If it's not within their realm of experience, it's just going to go over their head. Mm-hmm. You know, like everything that we draw wisdom from in life is accumulated through action, through experience. And that's the thing with these Eastern sages that I've kind of come to the conclusion about, is that whenever these people come to India and ask like Papaji, H.W.L. Punja, or Sri Ramana Maharshi these complex questions, they don't really give a shit to give you the answer. And they'll just straight up tell the student, like, it doesn't matter what the answer is. Because if I told you the most profound information, it's not going to make sense to you if it's not within your realm of experience. The only thing that you're going to do is you're going to take it. You're going to take ownership of it. You're going to turn it into some sort of dogmatic process. And you're going to create a system of belief that takes you away from your own experience.
Right. It's just like going to therapy. All they're going to do is ask you more questions so you can arrive at the solution on your own. Yeah, exactly. And also the best thing to do is to just inquire as to your own beliefs. I have a kind of a funny story on someone imposing their beliefs on me, and I thought it was hilarious. So one of my girlfriends was involved in this like mid-level marketing scheme where you sell insurance, you know, and life insurance. Life insurance is such a scam. P.S. It's the biggest scam ever. So she's pushing me to join these calls and to get involved, and you can make so much money. And, you know, why do you want to keep living simple, working a 9-to-5 when you can have your own business and make all this money and do all this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, number one, because I feel like it's a scam. And number two, what if I like my 9-to-5 job? What if I enjoy what I'm doing? You never asked me if I wanted to change jobs or if I even liked what I was doing. So, and she was like, oh shit. Yeah, I guess I should have asked you.
Yeah.
And she didn't ask. So I thought it was kind of funny. She's obviously no longer doing that because she's a smart girl. She figured out it was a scam. So
yeah. It's like that total lack of awareness that you are your own person. Mm-hmm. And it almost seems like just somebody trying to push their own values onto you, sort of like unsolicited,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess what I wanted to just be clear about as well as talking about beliefs is we identify too closely with them, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
We work so close with our beliefs that in some ways they end up becoming this sort of illusion of who we are.
Yeah, your beliefs are not who you are.
Yeah. You don't want to be moderated by your beliefs. Because otherwise we see someone imposing or challenging them as a criticism.
Right.
And then if that were the case, then your emotions are going to be thrown around all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And the best thing to do, especially if you're looking at it from a spiritual perspective, is to realize that there is an observer of every belief, and you have the choice as to whether or not you want to identify with one or let it go. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's the point, is to exercise. You can believe in something, absolutely, but don't believe in something at the cost of, somebody else's belief system or somebody else's life and somebody else's journey.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and it can cost you a relationship. It can cost you, a partner. It could cost you a friendship. It could cost you a business deal. You have to listen. I had a very good friend, and we were friends for a very long time, and she married someone that I didn't think was a good fit for her. And I never told her that because it wasn't my business, but they were having some problems, and she asked me what I thought of her partner. So I took that opportunity to be honest, and that I felt like he was a nice person, but I didn't think that he was the right person for her, because over the years I had noticed that she was not her true authentic self. She would hide things from him and hide things, from herself. And she just wasn't, she lost her spark, right? She lost her spunk. Yeah. And she felt like my advice, or my opinion rather, was me not being supportive of her marriage, right? Mm-hmm. So she came to me to ask me this question and ask me for my opinion. But then when I gave it to her, it's not what she wanted to hear. Yeah. So
usually isn't,
right? So be careful what you ask for.
I always used to run into that issue, Jen, when it came to giving advice. I'd always tell them it's not what you want to hear.
Right.
It's like, this is the one thing that I learned early on in relationships, is that like when your girlfriend asks you if this looks good, like she doesn't want to know your real opinion.
Nope.
She wants you to tell her that she looks good.
Yep.
Right. And I had to learn that the hard way. I mean, obviously the girlfriend or whoever it is that I'm with obviously looks good, but if you want my real honest opinion on whether or not this dress matches with that, I'm going to give you, or at least at that time, I'd give you honest feedback. Huh.
Like, I like the other shoes better. Or
like the other shoes better. And you get that look like, motherfucker. Yeah. You motherfucker.
And she's like, well, I like these better. Okay, then wear those. Why'd you ask?
Yeah. So I used to get into a lot of trouble with that, because when somebody asks me a question, I assume they want the answer.
Right.
Yeah. It makes me think of like, what is at the basis of belief? It's what's true, right? Like we have this affinity to truth. And if we were to dissect truth, well, what is truth? Like, what is truth? To me, truth is what we associate as right? There's right and good. And then the opposite of that is wrong, bad. That would be like a lie or an untruth. Right. But truth is what we identify as being good, not because God says so, but because we've experienced it for ourselves. So we experience truth in everyday life from our experiences. Well, how does that manifest? Like you could go and do something really good for somebody. Like how we gauge truth, I think, is driven by a certain level of action that works in our favor, and that also works for the betterment of somebody else, right?
Right.
And that is what truth is derived from, and that is what goodness, I think, is derived from. So if the basis of that is love, if truth comes from love, then that means that if you're open enough and you have enough courage, you'll look at every single denomination of spirituality in life that exists as just a, how would I say, it would basically be just the various ways in which God manifests in different regions of the world. Like we need to have Hinduism, we need to have Christianity, we need to have Catholicism, we need to even have all these other crazy religions that are out there, because if it provides somebody some level of happiness, how can they be wrong?
Right.
And if it's something that allows them to wake up every day and do good things for other people, if it allows them to love another person, to be good to their family, that is true spirituality, I think, at its core. So whatever it is that you believe in, I don't care what you believe in. But if you do believe in something, believe in it because it does good for your life, and believe in it because it brings out something like that spark, that sort of spark, that source sort of radiates from it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's how I know. That's how I gauge truth. I gauge truth by how loving it makes somebody feel. And if it is outside of that is not truth to me. So if anybody's telling you something and they happen to believe something different, and you can feel the love in their words, not necessarily the content of what they're saying, but if you can see love in another person.
Oh yeah.
You can see how spirituality affects another person. And if it affects them in a beautiful, loving sort of way, how can that not be right? Like it has to be true,
Yeah. It's really not your responsibility to tell someone how they should live their life and what they should believe.
It's true. Because
really
we don't think that maybe they need to experience what they experience.
Right.
Maybe
Everybody's here on their own journey.
Yeah. I didn't arrive to any place of value by listening to the experience of others. And at the same time, I needed to get my heart broken. I needed to go through just various levels of challenges, be really poor when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And there are so many various ways in which we arrive to awakening. It's not that sort of like you're born and then you just, you draw on this curriculum of just being good and give yourself all this shit for sinning or being bad. It's a collection of all of those things working together that bring you into this place of understanding. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Everybody's got their own trauma to work out, Yeah. So
there was a guy that asked Muji how something is inspired by love and inspired by God. And he says, because it sounds beautiful.
Oh,
and it doesn't necessarily have to be the content of a song or the content of somebody's, I guess it could be the content of a song or words, because when you listen to a song that's beautiful, there's just like a certain flow to it. It makes you feel good. It lights up all those, the neurotransmitters in your brain. It just makes you feel good. So that's how you know it's come from God, because it's beautiful. Like poetry. Poetry is the perfect example of that.
Yeah, it sure is. I've never really been into poetry, but, I do think that when I read famous poetry that pops up on Instagram or whatever in a meme, I'm like, oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I love poetry.
So do you ever ask yourself questions before you're going into a place of judgment about someone else's beliefs? So do you ever sit and think like, is this in my best interest or in this person's best interest? What exactly am I trying to accomplish with this?
It depends on what period of time we're talking about. Because I think every person on their path goes through a period of time where they have an experience, whether it's through plant medicine, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through reading books, where they get this aha moment. And the first impulse that they have is they want to share it with other people. Mm-hmm. There's an excitement there. So it's almost an innocent excitement to where it's like you want to go around telling your friends everything that you experienced. And you learn quickly that it just sort of goes over their head. And you go through this period of almost like a messiah complex in a way, right? And then you get older and you realize how important it is to not do that. How you realize that your experience is very specific to yourself and not anybody else. But as I get older, now I don't do that as much. Whenever somebody wants to talk to me about politics, religion, spirituality, I automatically, I would say I try and operate from that level of awareness. And as long as I'm operating from awareness, then I'm never, ever falling victim to the reactivity of my brain. Because the brain, the ego is the one that's like, whoa, gets triggered. This isn't what I believe. Let me tell you why. You're wrong. And I feel like it's a part of our conditioning. It happens to everybody. Like you can go on and turn on the TV. You can overhear a conversation in public, people saying all types of crazy shit. And there's that ego that always comes up that's like, that person's full of shit. That's not right. But I don't react on that. I try and see it from awareness, and I say, okay, this person is on their own journey, and you never know. Those beliefs that they have could lead them and catapult them into awakening.
Perhaps.
Do you go through that?
Perhaps.
When somebody like is talking in public or tries to tell you about something, wants to talk to you about something about politics or spirituality, do you get that reactivity?
Yeah, I will, and that's why I don't engage. So I think to myself, what exactly am I trying to accomplish by having this conversation with this person? You know, especially someone who is so dead set in their belief. You're not going to change their mind. I'm not going to try. It's not my responsibility to do that. Like, I'm just not going to engage. Because all it does is get me hyped up and irritated and anxious. So what's the point of that?
Yeah, those are tough conversations. And I think everybody has those family members that get together during Christmas and it's about, I want to say, barely midnight, maybe it's almost 1:00 and everybody's tanked. And you got those two, that cousin and that uncle that just sit and talk about politics.
Oh Lord, yeah.
And you're just like, oh.
It's like, ooh, this is the wrong time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, do I want to get into this? I don't know. And you can tell it just never goes anywhere. Because it's not a war on politics or religion. These are people's values. Mm-hmm. Like we hold our beliefs so strongly that it almost becomes a part of who we are. Right. And if somebody comes and threatens to take that away from you, it almost feels like somebody's taking a certain part of you away from them, like a certain part of them away from them. Yeah. And that isn't our responsibility to try and do that. Even though at the core, you know that you're not taking a part of them away, but they think that you are. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to allow people to believe and feel what they want, especially nowadays, that whole free speech thing. Like people are they don't want to be canceled. They talk about cancel culture, and then they talk about how free speech should be advocated. Like there's a lot of people out there for free speech, but I say if you believe in free speech, then you have to believe and be open and accepting to the fact that people believe something different than you do. Yeah. Agreed. And that involves spirituality, and that involves all level of politics. And even if you take one side and you happen to not agree, at least be open and at least don't shit on that person for believing something different. So I think the moral of the story that we wanted to talk about today is to just be open. Be open to learning new things. And if somebody believes something different than what you believe, try and find the baseline level of truth. Don't try and identify too much with their sort of a literal interpretation of the story, but if there's some love there, because if you're talking about Krishna and somebody else is talking about Buddha and the other one's talking about Jesus, they're all fundamentally the same, as long as you're looking at the true sort of baseline level of spirituality, which is love. So allow people to be on their own journey, because that's how they get to evolve.
Absolutely. And check yourself. Ask yourself 3 questions before you engage with someone. Is this in my best interest or in this person's best interest? What exactly am I trying to accomplish by the words that I'm saying? Do you really, truly understand and know this person's beliefs or desires? And how can pushing your agenda impact your relationship with that person?
Yeah. And that's really good advice. It's really good advice because life is like our beliefs are driven, at least this is the reason why we have to be careful with beliefs, is because we only understand them from our level of experience. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, somebody can come along and just tell you what they believe, and it's not going to make any sense to you. That's why it seems so futile and arbitrary to share and try and get somebody to convert to your beliefs, because if it's not within their realm of experience, it doesn't make any sense to them. Right. And they have to go through their life accumulating the experience in order to even arrive at the place of awakening or enlightenment or spirituality. And by imposing your beliefs, you're taking that opportunity away from them. You know,
Agreed.
God has a very, very specific curriculum for every single person on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to go through various levels of suffering and pain and happiness and tragedy in order to, one, resolve karma from their previous life, resolve karma in this life, but also understand like the basic sort of dynamics of how this reality works. And the only way that they're going to do that is by going through the various levels of experiences that they're going through, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
All
we covered,
right. I think we
lot of good
covered it.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. That was an intense one. That was a deep one, Jen.
Yeah, it was deep.
You know?
Very serious. Put our
Yeah, it was
serious hats on tonight.
Sometimes we got to go into serious. And everybody's listening. If you want a little bit of wisdom, hop online. Go on to wisdomofchopra.com and receive more wisdom from Mr. Deepak. I'll read one off while this whole thing is going. It says, the web of life differentiates into subjective miracles.
Ooh,
Sound
that's
good,
a good
right?
one.
Yeah, and if you ever like talking to somebody, maybe on the phone, and you want to say something really profound, just pull up this search engine.
Yeah.
And then just say, hey, making tea expresses an abundance of acceptance.
Maybe not that one. Don't
Yeah,
use
maybe not that one.
but
Maybe
yeah.
not that one. Yeah, that's funny stuff. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. You could find us on YouTube, like and subscribe to our videos. We have this, we record every episode. If you're actually listening to this on Spotify or even on Apple Podcasts, if you go into the info piece where we write our descriptions, it has a link to our YouTube page. If you click on the link, it'll take you to the video of this podcast. You can watch it in its entirety. And you can like and subscribe, do all the things, or you can send us an email. Other than that, yeah, I think it's good, right?
Yeah, that's everything.
All right, namaste, friends.
Namaste.